All right, everybody, thank you for joining us today. Today's webinar is Mastering Priority Management. During today's webinar, we are going to learn how to identify and focus on high priority work, make better decisions when everything feels urgent, align daily actions with larger goals, and reduce stress and increase productivity. My name is Jay Foreman. I'm with Workforce Solutions. I'm your host for today, but it is my absolute honor to turn this over to our presenter, John Thalheimer. He is one of the most dynamic speakers I've heard. You are in for a treat. It's not only the information that he has to give, it's the way that he delivers it. So, John, I'm excited for this. Without further ado, I'll turn the reins over to you.
Thanks, Jay. And that's a lot of pressure. I'm not sure if I can handle all that. Thank you for just kind of umping that up to the top level. Ladies and gentlemen, this is going to be a terrible webinar. It's going to be, no, I'm just kidding. I'm excited to be here. This is one of my favorite topics to discuss because it's so important. And I was saying to Jay and Diana before we started this session was that this is one of the ones that I always feel a little extra pressure when I'm delivering this because if you don't walk away from this hour and get your hour back in time savings, I haven't done my job, right? And so that is really my goal to kind of make sure that we do that. We kind of bring that in there. And it really starts with this question. And I do a lot of executive coaching, leadership coaching, and there's been so many times in those coaching conversations where they're like, how do I get everything done? Like they're asking me to do this, they're asking me to do this. I can't get it all done. And then we start talking about like, what are you managing? Are you managing your priorities? Are you managing your time? Where are you focused? Where are your efforts going? All of those things are so incredibly to think about. And I think all of us kind of have that moment of like, how am I going to get all this done? And so I want to start with a little exercise here. I'm going to give you 90 seconds. Grab a piece of paper and write down all the things you have to do in the next 7 days. And so, right, we have a weekend coming up, so maybe you have weekend plans. Um, it's tomorrow's Thursday, next day is Friday. Maybe you have to get things done before the weekend and just start writing everything down. I'm going to literally give you 90 seconds to capture it up. And in fact, I'm going to write some things down on my list while we're doing this. So just kind of give me there because I got some things to do. You can feel free to stop when you get to 100. I can see all of you guys thinking about, like, oh, what do I have to do? All these things, right? And so, again, right, capturing that stuff can be really important. We were in the full day or half day session. We would probably spend 5, 10 minutes doing this. And what we find is people have a lot of things on their minds. And so, one of the things we talk about in webinars and classes and stuff is being distracted. And so a lot of time that distraction comes from within. And so what I would suggest as I'm going through for the next 60 minutes, 50 minutes, I would think if something pops up in your head like, oh, I got to do that, write it down. Go back to that list, just kind of write it down. Go, oh, I need to do that because we're going to come back to that list in a little bit. We'll kind of jump into that list and kind of think about those things. And so the question comes up, why does managing our priorities matter? And so throw some ideas into the chat box, find that chat box and kind of tell me, why do you think it matters for us? Why does it matter for our organization? Why does it matter for our family that we're managing our priorities? What do you think? Good, Diana. What do you think? Why does it matter? Oh, we got a shy group today. All right. Thank you, Eugene, Tracy, Amy. Yeah, right. All those things, right? And so it's really important that we're really thinking about how do I manage my priorities versus how do I manage my time? Because here's the thing that happens, right? We get to perform higher quality work, right? That is such an important thing for us, being able to do that improves our reputation as trustworthy and reliable. I think about this in terms of my career, and if I am not trustworthy, and if I'm not doing what needs to be done, and I'm focused on these low-hanging fruits or these low priority items, people are not going to see me as somebody that can move into a higher position, can move into a higher level, right? We got to meet our meaningful goals. I think that applies outside of work as much as it applies to work, and thinking about what do we want to do, what do we want to accomplish always becomes really important. Reduce drama and rework, right? And so kind of doing it really well comes better, create more useful time, right? And so we only get, right, 168 hours every week. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't want to spend 168 hours at work. I want to be able to do other things, right? So how do I make sure I'm using that time wisely? And then, of course, making better choices about where our effort belongs is really important. Thank you for all the people that put those answers in there because I think it there. All right, so I need a yes or no answer. What do you think? Can we manage time? Give me a yes or no in that chat box. What do we think? Yes or no? Ah, all right. We got some no's, yes, most days. We got some yeses, got some no's. All right, we got a mix here, right? A lot of no, no, no. We manage tasks and projects. No, somebody says really loud. I love it, right? And so we can't manage time, right? Time is this thing that just keeps moving forward, right? It just keeps moving forward. It's kind of like the river, right? And it just keeps going, keeps going. We can't stop it. We can't save it. We can't stretch it, but we can manage how we use it. And that's really critical to remind ourselves is time's time. But how we use it is up to us. The choices we make on how we use that time is really what matters, and kind of addressing that becomes really important. So if we can't manage time, we can manage our focus, right? What are we focused our effort on? What are we focusing our activities on? And then our effort. How much effort are we applying to the things that we need to get done? How little effort are we applying to the things we don't need to get done? And then our effectiveness. We're going to spend a lot of today in our effectiveness and how do we become more effective with managing our priorities, managing that time that we have available. And then our behaviors. What are those things that get in our way from holding us back from doing what we need to do? And so let's start with our focus, right? Because I think this is really important. When I think about my perspective on things, and it's really about decision quality and how do we make better decisions. We can only make better decisions if we know where we're going. What is our priorities? What is our vision? What is our direction? And so kind of focusing on that becomes important, right? And so Daniel Oates says, desire dictates our priorities, prior shapes our choices, and choices determine our actions. And so knowing where that focus is. So organizationally, I always think about this as kind of a ladder, like a corporate ladder, as it was, or a goal ladder, maybe is a better term to use. But we have to understand what is our organization about, right? What is our organization about in terms of its vision or mission? And now, for some of us working in the nonprofit sector, that we can kind of turn to our probably webpage and kind of see that. For others, we really need to reach out to the big boss and go, hey, boss, what are we trying to accomplish here? What are the big goals? What are we trying to do? And then we take that, right? We take those big goals and we look about it from our department, right? If we're a leader, we look at it from our department point of view and go, okay, so what does my department need to do to reach those priorities, right? What is it that my department needs to do to reach those priorities? And then we kind of take it down to the team level, right? What does my team need to do to reach the department goals? And then what do I need to do individually to reach the team goals so the team reaches the department goals, which reaches the organizer, right? You kind of see that ladder in there. And so really understanding that and breaking that down. And so one of my recommendation is making sure you're clear on those priorities. And if you're not, you need to have a conversation with the big boss, right? Go talk to the big boss and go, hey, I really need to understand where are we going? Where should I be putting my effort? Because if we don't know, and maybe this has happened to you, but if we don't know, then we start putting our energy where we think it is. And then somebody comes and goes, why are you doing that? That's not important. And you're like, well, what? Right? Here's the thing. In every organization, priorities shift. And so we have to be paying attention. What we're doing today may not be as important as what we're doing next week. And so kind of looking at that and do that. One of my favorite questions for you to go back to and ask your boss, how will you know, boss, that my team has been successful? Right. And so that's a really important question. Go back just to your boss. Maybe you don't have a team. Maybe you're an individual contributor, subject matter expert. How will you, boss, how will you know that I have been successful? If you do have direct reports, you need to be able to answer that question for them. And so you should be going through to every one of your team members, like, what does success look like? Now, we can get into defining metrics for this. We can get into looking at all of those things, but understanding what success looks like is critical, right? And so and look, we can take this outside our life, right? Outside of work and think about our lives. What does success look like for me? And that may be an important reminder when we're at work, like, what is the most important thing in my life? Right. And so maybe it's your partner, maybe it's your family members, maybe it's somebody else in there. And so kind of thinking about what are you working on today and why does that matter to the organization? Is that the most important thing you could be doing on your time? I'm challenging you a little bit because I really want you to think about what are those things that I am working on? Does it matter? And so kind of looking through that process and going, okay, am I really focused on those things? There's a great parable that's been explained many different ways about the importance of the big rock, right? And so it's about a story about a professor comes into a class one day and he comes in and he puts this glass jar on his desk. And he takes out these big rocks and put those rocks in the jar and asks the class, is it filled? And they're all like, yeah, 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 it's filled. And then he pulls out this other little jar with smaller rocks and pours it in right over the big rocks and kind of puts it in there, kind of fits it in there. And he goes, well, now is it filled? And they were kind of getting on to the professor and they're like, well, it looks like it's filled. And then he pulls out this cup of sand and pours that in there. And then fills it up, right? Now it's filled to the top. And he says to the class, and I think it's a good reminder, is how we go about doing things matters, right? This jar is your life. And the important things are your family, your career, right? What are those really important things? Your relationships with your friends, right? Those are the really important things. And then those smaller things could be task at work and managing your money and doing those kind of things. And then the sand is those really little items. But if you focus on the sand first, you're never going to get all the rocks in there, right? You're not going to be able to get the rocks in the jar. And so it becomes this really important lesson for all of us to kind of think about, am I focusing on what matters to me? What is the most important thing to me, right? And so kind of looking at that. Look at those things on your 7-day list. Are they the big rocks or are they the sand stuff, right? And kind of looking on that becomes that really important focus to kind of there. Now, goals are great. Priorities are great. They set our direction, right? We need to know that to get us direction, but the actions are what takes us there, right? The actions will allow us to get there. So if we can't manage our time, we can manage the amount of effort we're putting in. And so I have this self-audit. This is a smaller version of a larger self-audit. I'm not going to give you a lot of time. I'm going to put up little statements on here and I want you to rate them on a scale of 1 to 5. 1 meaning not at all, 5 meaning very frequently, right? And so kind of looking at that and kind of seeing that will be kind of important. Kind of put yourself in that, right? How often do you work late? How often do you miss deadlines? How often do you miss important family events? How often do you not accomplish what you planned for the day? How often do you focus on low priority items? How often do you feel stressed because you aren't meeting your deadlines? Oops, that's it. And so if you're a 6, that's the low score, and then 5, well, no, 6 is good. 5 is not 30, is when higher, closer you are to 30, the more likely that you're not managing your time well, right? If you're on a scale, you're down around 6, then you're probably managing your time really well and you're kind of doing really well. I remember the first time I did this audit, and what really impacted me was the question about how often do you miss important family events? And I can think back to numerous times where missed Thanksgiving, I missed Christmas, I missed family birthdays because I was at work. And I was balancing, I was trying to do what I thought I needed to do at work. And that was what I was called for. And that's what I was doing. No, right? And so kind of looking back on that and going, maybe I need to prioritize those important family events, right? Need to be there on that. Working late, and there's another one. Is that just habitual or is there a reason that you're working late? The goal, of course, is to kind of go through that and do that. And so one of my favorite saying here is effort wrongly applies is wasted energy. And there's so many times we're not directing it towards the right thing, right? So again, understanding those priorities, understanding where we're doing that becomes important. So one of the things, oh my goodness, I was just having this conversation yesterday. And so I was doing what do we call them? Strategic conversations with the team. And we are trying to improve the team's performance. And one of the challenges they had was they didn't understand how much time they were spending on different projects. And so it came up about tracking time. And they said exactly what my quote on the screen is, oh, I hate tracking this. But here's the thing. I have done this exercise with numerous of my coaching clients. And they all said the same thing. I don't want to do it. Blah, 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 right? I hate it. I'm not going to be able to do it well. I need a system, whatever. And I said, look, try it. And what happens is we start better understanding where our time is going. Right? Have you ever looked at your Apple phone and you looked at the screen time and all of a sudden you look there and you go, oh, I spent 3 hours this week on Facebook, or 3 hours today on Facebook, right? This is what that does for you. Like, oh, I was spending it on these projects that are probably not that important, right? They may seem urgent to somebody, but they're just not that important. And so we really go through this and kind of look at, oh, am I really spending the time where I need to spend my time? I know it's a challenge to do, but it becomes really important. I think the hardest part about this exercise is to face it, right? To face like, oh, I'm spending a lot of time on social media, or I'm spending a lot of time doing nothing or watching television, right? And so kind of being aware of that, being intentional allows us to make sure that our efforts are being used in the right place to make that happen. So how do we get positive energy, right? So energy is this thing that allows us to do our jobs well. And so how do we get more energy? How do we get that positive energy? So here's the thing, quick tips off the top of my head. Number one, sleep. We need to be getting 7 to 9 hours a day. It's hard, right? I talk to a lot of people. I ask people in my classes, how many hours of sleep you're getting? 6, 5, 4. Sometimes people are getting 9, but that's not the average. And so thinking about, am I giving myself, my body needs that sleep, right? It's a natural thing. We need it. It's not something that we can ignore. It's not something that we're like, oh, I don't need that. You definitely need it, right? So kind of doing that. Exercise. We know that exercise is this thing. There's this great study that was done where individuals took a 15-minute walk outside and they just felt in the afternoon, they felt much more energized after that walk versus having a cookie versus drinking a coffee. They just felt much more energized just going outside and walking, right? Bring a friend along, kind of doing that. We know eating well, right? Making sure that we're doing that. Social connection. One of the things we have to understand about ourselves is that we are social beings, right? We need that social connection. Now, here's my caveat. You don't need 150 friends that you're going to go out with and party and that kind of stuff. You just need 2 or 3 really close friends that you share time with, you have that, right? And you build that on, you vent to them, you kind of get into those activities, become really important. Building confidence is really good because what happens when we have low confidence, we're using much more energy than when we have a lot of confidence, right? And so building our energy by just kind of getting into knowledge, kind of building that and finding what works for us, what motivates us, our intrinsic motivation, knowing that really can help us kind of get in there and build that energy up to get that level. All right, so now let's move into the effectiveness part. And this is where we're going to spend most of the webinar today. I really want us to understand, like, how do we become more effective with the time that we have available to us? And so it really starts with the Eisenhower matrix. So President Eisenhower, General Eisenhower, Dwight Eisenhower, before he became president, he was giving a presentation at a local college in his area, and he started talking to the provost. And he said to the provost, "Hey, so how do you deal with all those things you need to do? You're a busy guy and that kind of stuff." And the provost said to him, "You know what? I got two kinds of problems: the urgent and the important. The urgent are not important, and the important are never urgent." And Eisenhower kind of talked that and said, you know what, that's really important when we think about the things that come across our desk at a high level. They're either going to be urgent and important, they're going to be urgent and not important, right? They kind of created what he called the Eisenhower matrix and kind of thought about it from his point of view. Anything that came on his desk, he looked at and he said, well, if it's high urgency, high importance, that means I needed to act right away, right? I needed to deal with this right away. And so we're going to talk about what does that is, what does that kind of look like? And then we have the high urgency, low importance. Those are the things that we need to delegate, right? We need to delegate to somebody else. And then we have the high importance and low urgency. Here's kind of a teaser. That's where you should spend all your time, if possible. And then we have the low importance and low urgency. And those are the things that Eisenhower said we shouldn't probably be doing. I guarantee there are things that you are doing that are not adding any value to your life, any value to your team, any value to the organization. You should not be doing those, right? And so kind of looking at that becomes important. So let's jump into the ACT, right? And so when we look at the ACT quadrant, this is take immediate action, right? High urgency, high important, low time investment. And so typically when I'm looking at these types of things, this is crisis management, right? This is something that was not on your plan for the day and popped up, right? And so that could be a power outage at work. It could be an employee giving their resignation. It could be any of those things that are just like, okay, I have to take care of it. Right? I have to do it right now. And it's a really crisis management thing. A lot of individuals in the workplace, right? A lot of individuals in the workplace just go from fire to fire, right? They're just putting out fires, right? And so they're handling those crisis things. They come in the morning like, well, I'm here. I'm just going to deal with crises today. And that's one way to do your work. But that's not the right way. That's not the best way to do your work, right? Because if you start planning it, you start building it, you get in there as well. And so these are things like completing a priority, talking to a coworker, meeting with the boss, working on a task, right? Those are the things that you need to take immediate action on and go, okay, I'm going to deal with that. But what we really want you to do is spend time in the planning stage, right? The strategy stage. These are low urgent but high importance, right? And there's a high time investment. One of the things that I would say to you all is put right this week, next week, put 1 hour of strategic thinking about like, what do I need to do a month from now? And then as time passes, I want you to add another hour and another hour. You should, depending on your role, have up to 5 to 10 hours of strategic thinking time on your calendar. Right? Because that's going to allow you not to have to deal with crises. You're going to be able to address those things and kind of deal with that, right? So Brian Tracy says a clear vision backed by definite plans gives you a tremendous feeling of confidence and personal power. You're taking control of your time, right? And so when we think about the planning quadrant, what we are doing here is saying, I'm taking control of my time. This is my time. I get to choose where I'm going to do that. And so I am not reacting to your low priority stuff because you haven't planned. I'm going to make sure that I'm doing it, kind of doing it. And so how do we do that? One of the most important things, I think we all have maybe that to-do list. Maybe you guys wrote a to-do list earlier in the class, but you need to have it effective, right? And so an effective to-do list says that here's the project, here's the task that I need to do, here's the priority level of it, here's the date I needed to get done, and here's how much time it's going to take. That allows you to kind of skim that and go, okay, what are my priorities? What are the things that I need to do now for the future, right? And so kind of looking through that, what are the high priority things? Oh gosh, I have 15 minutes. I could probably do this in 15 minutes, right? It gets to using your time better. The action method is kind of very similar to that, where it's like, okay, these are the things that I need to do. We move them into the to do. We have a done thing, very similar to Kanban method. The Kanban method is much more effective for a team. And basically, what you're doing is on a big board, you're putting like, hey, here's all the tasks that need to be done. Somebody then comes in and goes, well, I'm going to take this task and I'm going to put it in the doing task. And then you'll have another board that says, okay, I have the done one over here. And then you can see visually where the team is and what's working on it, right? And so a lot of dashboards, a lot of project management is really that Kanban method in technology, right? And so kind of looking at that becomes important. And then the next one is block scheduling. I love this, and I love the story behind it. So Benjamin Franklin, right, one of our founding fathers, had a very clear schedule that he used every day of his life. This is the schedule he followed to allow him to be so effective as an inventor, a writer, a politician, right? Kind of getting all those things in. But what I love about this Ben Franklin story is every morning he woke up and he would he would say this question to himself: what good shall I do to this day? Right? And that kind of really planning, thinking about what am I going to do today? Where am I going to get that? And so then at the end of the day, he would ask himself, what good have I done today? Right? And so kind of looking back on the day going, hey, did I do what I said I was going to do? And if not, why not? Having that conversation. So he would block out his time. And so in the morning, right, between 5 and 8 o'clock, he would rise, wash, and address the powerful goodness. He would say, contrive day's business, take the resolution of the day, and prosecute the present study and breakfast, right? And then from 8 to 12, he would work. He would get his work done. He would work very hard, get all his work done. From 12 to 2, though, he would read, maybe overlook his accounts, and he would dine. He would have lunch. And then 2 to 6, he would work. And then from 6 to 9, he would put things in their place, supper, music, diversions, or conversations and examination of the day. And then from 10 to 5, right, 10 to 6, I guess, he would sleep. Right? And so this block method becomes a very effective tool. And so one of the things that I do is typically on Friday afternoon, right? Now it's Friday afternoon. It used to be Sunday mornings when I was working in corporate, but now I think it's more like Friday afternoon. I take an hour, maybe an hour and a half, and I sit down and go look at my calendar for the next week. And then I think about my priorities, and then I'm like, is my calendar shaping my priorities, or is my priorities shaping my calendar, right? Because that's the latter is what we want. And so I look through and go, okay, am I spending the time I need on those priorities that are important to me? And so kind of look through there, right? And so you can see here, I was doing some work down in Belmont University. And so I had prep for the presentation, I had rehearsal, I was doing a class on HR law, leadership essentials at Belmont, right? And so I was kind of planning my week out, but notice the green ones, right? Those were the ones that was one of my high priorities is spending time with my beautiful wife, right? So I wanted to do that. And so this was around Christmas time. And so I had dinner on Tuesday with my beautiful wife. And then on Friday, we were going out early to celebrate the season and kind of do something. I don't remember what it was. But doing that becomes a really good thing. So planning that out allows you to create these strong blocks of time that you're using for your priorities. Now, what I love about blocking this out in use of the time to-do list is that one of the things that I tell people to do is create a 5-minute to-do list. These are things you can do in less than 5 minutes. And so maybe I get done early on my prep for the presentation. In fact, that happened today. I was preparing for this webinar. I got done earlier than I thought I would, and I had a list of things that I needed to get done. So instead of just sitting there going, okay, I'll just wait. I got 45 minutes. I'll just sit and wait, right? Because I don't want to start a big project. I pulled up my 5-minute to-do list and I said, oh, I can get that done. I can get this done. I can get this done. And I ended up working right up until about 10 minutes before the program began because I had things I do. Maybe it's just a phone call to somebody reaching out going, hey, I have a quick question for you. Maybe it's an email that you need to get done. Maybe you just need to check in with one of your coworkers. That 5-minute to-do list is going to help you be much more effective with your time than thinking about like, well, I only got 10 minutes, so I'm just going to chat with somebody. You could be like, hey, I got 5 minutes. I can get this done and chat with somebody, right? And so kind of looking at that. And so block scheduling becomes really important. All right. So the next skill that we need to know is delegation. And when I talk to leaders and executives, and we're talking about one of the things they don't feel they're good at, it's delegation, right? So delegation is high urgency, low importance. So by low important, I mean, sure, it may be important to the organization, but in terms of your priorities, probably not raising up to one of your top 5 priorities, right? Something that you're not going to focus on, but the team needs to focus on. And so you're going to delegate that, right? And so there is a medium time investment with delegation, especially in the beginning. And so we're looking at this, right? So delegation is the art of achieving specific, defined results through the empowerment and motivation of others. What it's not is going to one of your coworkers or one of your employees and dumping work on their table, going, here, take care of this. I'm not doing it. That's not the use of delegation, right? That's not working really well. It may feel good in the moment. It's really not doing that. And so it's giving responsibility, it's requiring accountability from that individual, and it's granting them authority to make decisions. And a lot of times when I'm talking to leaders, they're like, oh, delegation. I don't want to delegate. So why? Tell me in the question box or the chat box, I should say. Why might some people not want to delegate? What would be some of the reasons that they would not want to delegate? Lose control of the outcome. Yeah, good, Gene. What else? Yeah, worried of judgments, fear of losing control. There's something else that I'm kind of looking for to see if you guys get it, right? Because I talk to a lot of leaders and they're like, oh, this is why I don't delegate. Oh my goodness, my screen just went out. That's not good. I don't know if you guys can hear me or not because my screen just went out. Did my computer just go out? Oh, my computer just went out.
We can still hear and see you, John.
Okay, well, uh-oh.
Our apologies for that, folks. It looks like we may have lost John. Just give us a few minutes. I'm sure he's going to attempt to jump back on.
Hey, I'm back. Hello. All right, people can hear me now. All right, fantastic. Hey, Diana, when you have a chance, can you give me control so I can get back in and show my slides? That would be
I
greatly
just
appreciated.
sent it your way, John.
Good. All right, thank you. All right, isn't that fun? Don't you guys love technology? Technology is one of those things that you love until it stops working. All right, let me get back in here. All right. I know we were talking about delegation. I need to delegate some stuff, I think. All right. So why do some people delegate? Let me go back to the chats. Let me look. Okay. Well, I lost all the chats. Okay. So I know you guys were saying things. I'm going to leave my camera off just in case that was the issue. I know you were all saying things like we lose control, which is so true, right? We lose control. We don't feel comfortable. When I talk to a lot of people, it's like they're not doing it right, John. My team isn't doing it right. I delegate to them, but then they don't do it right. And I'm like, yes, that happens, right? And so here's the thing that I would say about that is that it's not about perfection. And I think a lot of times we have clear expectations of what we want and we try to communicate them and we don't do a good job in it, but we have to allow them to do it their own way, figure out how to do it, how to accomplish it, as long as the results are the results that we want, right? So that's what becomes really important to make sure that we're doing that in there. And so we can delegate a lot, right? So we can delegate routine tasks, right? Those tasks that we already know how to do is completely straightforward. We can give that to somebody on our team. And we can do that because maybe they need to learn that skill. Maybe they need to bring that skill in. Maybe they need to understand that. And then task others could do better, right? And so I use delegation kind of as a stretch assignment. I need you to get better at this. So I'm going to give you this assignment so you can practice those skill sets, so you can get the knowledge, so you can be better at those things, right? And so if there's somebody on my team that maybe not good at presentations, I'm going to give them a small presentation to do so they get to practice, so they get more confidence in there, right? So building those things up becomes there. You don't have to delegate everything, right? You don't have to delegate everything. Now, who do we delegate to, right? We can delegate not only downward, but we can also delegate sideways. And in some cases, we can delegate up, right? Right. In certain instances, that is something that a leader should be doing. And so we can kind of take that responsibility and say, hey, I think this is where you're going to need to make a decision. I want to delegate this up to you. It's harder, but you can do that. The bigger one that I think that we need to think about is AI, right? And so AI is coming, folks. It's coming to a workshop. It's coming to a workplace near you. It's coming, right? And so what do we delegate as managers and leaders? What do we delegate? We can draft emails, policies, and job descriptions. Again, draft. We have to take ownership. We got to make sure they're right. Training materials, presentations, performance summaries, all of that drafting is a good tool to use. It is great for summarizing, right? And so if you have a large report, put it through AI and say, hey, can you summarize this versus assigning it to somebody, right? And so, hey, can you just summarize this? No, have the AI do that. Long emails or documents, right? They're coming up in our mailbox now. It's kind of summarizing things. I get summarized now on my phone. It's good for structuring, kind of getting in there for creating agendas, checklist plans, breaking ideas into steps like, hey, we want to do this. What are the steps that need to be done? There are a lot of reasons to do that. Talking point for conversation. So you're going to have a conversation with somebody like I need to talk to them about a performance issue. Put it in there like what should I be saying, right? So this is our role, this is our goal, this is what's happening. Allow them to do that. Um, Lots of AI, right? And so again, there's lots of ways to use it. This is not an AI class, or otherwise I would spend another 3 hours on this. But here's the thing. AI can handle the work. You still own the responsibility, right? So if you are going to delegate, make sure that you understand, delegate to AI, you understand that you're still accountable. If you're delegating to your team, you're still accountable, right? And so you're kind of doing that as a way and kind of using it as a tool, right? And so let's finish up, at least with this part of the exercise is stop, right? These are low urgency, low importance, time investment. These do not, you should stop doing, right? Now, there's some questions on the slide that I kind of think are really important in terms of should I stop or should I keep it going? And so the first one is, does it fit into one of the other three quadrants, right? Is it something that maybe fits in one of the other three quadrants? If it is, let's place it in the right place. Will the expenditure of energy doing whatever the task is help you reach your goals? In other words, is it moving your goals forward? If not, don't do it. However, if that expenditure of energy will help someone else reach their goal on your team, right? You're doing something that's probably not beneficial to you, but beneficial to the bigger team, then you need to kind of keep doing it, right? And so kind of looking at those things becomes important. But if it doesn't fit into any of those questions, then stop doing it. I can promise you there are things that you're doing that you think are important that are probably not important. Question like, why are we doing this particular task is a great exercise to do with the team. Like, why do we do this? Is it giving us an organization any better? And so we're not going to do this activity, but after the webinar, what I would want you to do is go back to that list you created or look at your to-do list and write each one into, is that something that I need to do immediately? Is that something I'm going to delegate? Is that something that I'm going to plan and think about and work on? Or is it something that I should stop doing? Here's the thing that a lot of my clients will do, and a lot of people that I'm in my training sessions do. They take this slide and they put it on their desk. And as things come in, they kind of look up and go, something I need to do right now. All right, high importance, high urgency, I'm going to do it. Oh, that's not really as important to me, but I'll get so-and-so to delegate. That's going to be a great team building for them or great opportunity to stretch their skills. Oh, it's high importance, but I need to plan, take some time on it. It's not urgent right now, but I want to be prepared when it is urgent. And so kind of doing that and then stop, right? And so kind of looking at those things, it allows you to kind of help kind of filter your workflow into where things should go. And so the last thing today is talking about our behaviors. And this one gets a little harder, right? And so I'm not going to go into much detail, but I do want to kind of drop in and kind of think about some of these things because sometimes we get in our own way, right? We get in our own way because we are not behaving in a way that's allowing us to be effortful, right? Not getting in there to kind of do that becomes important. So barriers to productivity. Number one is procrastination. Tell me yes or no. Are you a procrastinator? I want to hear in the chat box. Let me know. And so when I talk to people about procrastination, there's kind of two kind of thoughts. They're like, I work best under pressure, John. And so I need to procrastinate because I'm going to wait to get things done. And the other one's like, I'm just kind of busy and I don't think about it. And all of a sudden it just pops up on my calendar and I'm like, oh, I need to get it done. And so kind of doing that. Yes, because I operate better under tight timelines. Sometimes, occasionally, yeah, I love these. And so here's the thing with procrastinating. Research has shown time and time again, when you procrastinate, you are not putting your best effort forward. It's just not. You're not producing. Maybe it's great. Maybe it's reaching the level that you need to do, and it makes perfect sense. Like, I'm just going to wait until this last minute, and I'm going to do it. Maybe that reduces your stress levels because you're not worried about it. Like, I'm just going to wait for the last minute, and I'm going to put it together. But I just don't think you're producing the best thing you can do, right? And so kind of thinking about, like, why am I procrastinating? And a lot of the times we find it's like, oh, I just don't want to do it. It's not my favorite task. I'm not going to do it. In that case, right, that procrastinating is not helping you any. And so the best way to overcome procrastination is just to start, And even if you don't plan to get a lot done, just say, you know what, I'm going to work for 10 minutes on this. And typically what happens is when you get in there and you start motivating, you kind of get there, all of a sudden things get done. There are times for me, I like to procrastinate occasionally, right? And I remember this happened this weekend. I had a big presentation yesterday and I had been working on it, but I wasn't there. And so I came in on Sunday and I'm like, okay, I'm going to do some work. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to do some work. I'm not going to be here long. I'm just going to start. And I started, and then I got into it, and I'm like, oh, I can get more of this done. And I ended up spending 2 hours and feeling much better for my conversations on Monday to prepare the team for the big presentation on Tuesday, right? And so I felt much better. It relaxed me, kind of getting it, right? So kind of thinking through some of that. All right, number two is distractions and interruptions. Tell me what's your biggest distraction? What is the one thing that distracts you the most? I've been saying to people, because we've been talking a lot about this in a lot of the training and workshops I've been doing, is that 57% of the time we are not focused on what's in front of us. Them phone calls, right? The cell phone. Yeah. And so I think there's two things that really distract us. Number one is the phone, right? The phone is this distraction machine. We can get on there, we can look at social media, we can look at email, we can kind of do work on it, right? It becomes this distraction for us. And so kind of being aware of that, right? And so what do you do with your phone when you go to work? Do you put it aside? Do you put it in a cage so you can't hear it, right? What do you do with that becomes an important thing. And then the other thing is our own minds, right? Our own minds are distraction machines, right? Our minds like to wander. You probably wandered during this webinar, right? And so that happens, right? And so how do we kind of deal with that? And so one of the things I suggested, which we started out with this webinar on, is having that to-do list with you at all times. And when something comes up and you're like, oh, I need to think about that, put it on your to-do list, capture it there. That way you're not distracted by that thought anymore. I was in the presentation yesterday, the workshop that I was doing, and I told people about this, and I saw like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, everyone had that sheet of piece of paper out, and they were writing things on it as the class went on, because those are the things that can interrupt you, right? And kind of distract you from that. How many of you can't say no? Come on, be honest. Tell me yes or no. Can't say no to others. This is a big one. We were talking about this in a couple of my classes, workshops, where can I say no? Am I allowed to say no? And they were like, wow, that's permission. I like having that permission to say no. And the goal here is not to say, no, I'm never going to do any work, right? Because we would all love to say that to our bosses, like, no, I'm not doing any work. And so it's the ability to say no by saying yes. And so some recommendations that I have is you can set it up so that activity is a little harder for them. Like, yeah, I can do it, but I can't do it this week. Or you could say, one of my favorites is, yeah, I could work on that, and that's kind of probably my expertise. However, my plate's full. I'm going to need somebody else to take on over here, right? That's a kind of a great way to do that. The other thing is a lot of times you'll have people wanting to meet with you. And I would always say, hey, yeah, I would love to meet with you. Can you come in early tomorrow? I'm here usually around 8 o'clock. Can you meet me then? And it's funny how many people no longer need to meet with you when you say that, right? They're like, all right, I'll get to you later. And I'm like, all right, well, I offered the time, right? And so kind of thinking about ways to say no by saying yes. Like, I can give you that next month, or I can do that there, right? Owning your time is critical, right? And so owning that time can be really important, kind of critical to do that. Number four, thinking busy and productive are the same thing. I worked in this company and we would walk down the hallway and we'd be like, hey, how's it going? And they would be like, oh, I'm busy. I'm busy. I got busy things to do. Or this is one that's probably happened to you. Somebody said, you asked them, hey, will you want to go and do this with me? Or, hey, can you help me with this project? And they said, no, I'm too busy. Here's what they're really saying. That's not a priority to me. That's just not a priority to me. So I'm not going to get in there. I'm not going to work on it. Right. And so I think that becomes really, and so you have to understand Doing things for the sake of doing things, right? Being busy is not being productive. Being productive is choosing intentionally what are you going to work on to get things done. Now, sometimes, right, in the morning, I'm kind of tired, I'm not working, I'm like, I'm going to start with the easy stuff first because I need to build up my energy. I need to kind of get motivated. I need to get things done, but then I'm going to segue into the bigger project. And sometimes, ideally for me, I'm going to start the bigger project first, right? I'm going to do that before my emails, before I call back anybody. I'm going to start on the bigger project because that's what's most important to me, right? And so kind of looking at that as well. And then not taking breaks. What? Productivity, not taking breaks. The research is out, ladies and gentlemen. The research is out that when we don't take breaks, our productivity goes down, 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 right? And so we are not productive after a certain amount of time working. And it's different for everyone, right? There's different one there. There's different ways to kind of work around that. But we know that if we're not taking a break during the day, we're not taking a break in the afternoon, our productivity is going to suffer. Drinking caffeine is not going to help, right? Energy drinks are not going to help. Our productivity will go down after a time. And so this also goes for the big picture, right? This is the picture that, like, hey, it's summer. I need to take time off, right? And so getting away, letting that mind relax, getting out of that work churn can be a really important process for you all, right? And so kind of thinking about that and doing that, that's one, I will tell you, taking breaks is a hard one for me because I get into focus. I love my work. I love what I'm doing. But stepping aside and going, you know what? I need some time for myself, or I need to go and get away and stop thinking about work. Honestly, what happens, the best ideas come when we're not thinking about it, right? And so kind of making sure that we're taking breaks as well. All right, so I've talked a lot. Sorry about that interruption in the middle of it, but hey, that's called technology, kind of fun. But if you have any questions, go ahead and throw them into the chat box, and I will do my best to answer them. Jay, do you have any comments? Anything you want to add?
Yeah, John, I just wanted to say thank you. You did not disappoint. I knew you wouldn't, and I hope you take this the right way. If any of our presenters had to have had the screen go out on them, I'm glad it happened to you, just because I was 100% confident that you were going to figure it out and be back with us within a few minutes, and you were. You were like one of those people that you see trip and do a somersault and get right back up and start walking just the way they were before. So you didn't miss a beat. Thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah. I will say there was a lot of panic on my side. You guys didn't get to see it, but there was a lot of panic on my like what happened? Because I didn't know what happened. It was really weird. Eugene asked, is there a recommended reading using the Eisenhower matrix? Gosh, that's a good question. I can't remember. Um, I learned it. So there is, oh, Jay, do you remember what there's another term for the Eisenhower matrix, and I can't think of the author who put it out there. It may be Tony Robbins. He has some good stuff on production man. There's a great book called Getting Things Done. Highly recommend it. He has very good techniques on how to get things done, and he refers to the Eisenhower matrix, but doesn't go into a full explanation on it. I'm looking at my bookshelf. I don't.
Is it Stephen Covey?
Maybe it is
John?
Stephen Covey. Yes,
Yeah.
maybe it is Stephen Covey. Uh,
First things first, I think. Yeah.
yeah, maybe it's the first things first. Yeah, it could be. Yeah, that would be it as well. Any other questions? Thank you, Diana, for jumping in.
Of course.
All right, well, John, we just wanted to thank you again for being with us today. And thank you for everyone that invested your time with us for the last hour. I know, John, speak for all of us. I think we all got a lot out of this, so we really appreciate your nuggets of wisdom. This was recorded. It will be emailed out to everyone when we're done here. And I also wanted to invite everyone back. Next month's webinar is July 15th from noon to 1 o'clock. Hiring employees, the critical first step to success. Will be another great one. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you in July. Thank you, everyone.